What better way to start a retrospective series than with a game barely anyone has heard of, let alone played? I don't know, so onwards with a revisit of Dirty Larry Renegade Cop. It's fair to say it's not a title that has been well documented, perhaps as it was on this brick. Sorry. This brick, the Atari Lynx. I'll save the in-depth history lesson for another time, but basically this was another system that fell to the might of the Game Boy, despite having some visually impressive software for the time. Anyway, the game has stimulated little intelligent discussion on game facts, there are barely any reviews of it, and it doesn't even have a dedicated pin pad like so many Lynx games. And even Ishido, The Way of the Stones, got one. That must have hurt. Regardless of that though, the amount of words expended on this game is changing right here and right now. Basically, as the name and instruction manual would suggest, Dirty Larry is a playful take on the famous Dirty Harry series of films. It is fortunately not in any way related to the Leisure Suit Larry series. You play as the titular Larry, a cop that doesn't follow the rules, and, well, you should probably know where the rest of this sentence is heading if you've ever watched Dirty Harry, which you should have. Starting the game up, it's clear that a fair amount of effort has gone into the game's presentation, as could be said for many titles on the Lynx. After all, it's not a system that eases up on visual sheen, for better or for worse. The music has a great beat, and the detailed cutscene at the start paints Larry as a cop that does not give one single damn. I know this is only the opening few seconds, but they still manage to set the tone perfectly. So it's a shame that as soon as you start the game proper, most of this work is undermined. There's no longer any music, so any possible atmosphere gets punctured like an economy value balloon. If you don't believe me, which of these sounds better to you? This? Or this? This? Or this? This? Or this? More importantly though, you're thrown into the fray with no idea of what the controls are. Unless you've read the manual first, of course. And who does that? So you can expect to start off taking a fair bit of damage, like I am right here. The game has you jumping over these standard goons' bullets for a start, when you might expect a trusty duck to be the best strategy. Sadly that isn't the case, and you'll just get a bullet in the mug for your troubles. In fact, ducking is rarely an effective strategy, with leaping usually the best course of action. It does look a tad ridiculous. When have you ever seen cops jump around like this? Never mind. The controls feel a little awkward with jumping assigned to pressing up on the D-pad, which is always a delight, but considering the Lynx's paltry number of buttons, that's probably to be expected. The real issue here is that the combat feels needlessly unfair. This is one of those tippy-tappy games where you have to edge forward slowly in order to make progress, and avoid taking hits from enemies that rush onto the screen. Imagine if you had to live life like that. It would be bad. Even then, some blows feel just unavoidable, especially when two characters turn up on screen. How are you supposed to avoid all this? There's a plethora of health and ammo pickups around, just as well considering there are no continues, but this still only seems an attempt to mask the game's underlying problems. But what makes this all the worse is that Dirty Larry has bags of potential. There's some real character in the, characters you'll face. There are standard goons, but also what look like haggard ladies of the night, fired up drug users, literally, motorbikers, bald Duke Nukem's, and these guys, who are a welcome if slightly baffling nod to the Warriors. The locations all have some scope to be exciting too, with promisingly grimy locations such as a high street and a moving subway train. Sadly, both these elements never fuse together to create a particularly satisfying experience. The environments too often settle for the routine after an interesting start, for instance, with stages set in a hotel and a sewer. More concerning is that the locations just act as nicely detailed window dressing. There is never, in the parts I went through at least, any unique obstacles or items to interact with. It's just you and an almost endless stream of bad guys. The backgrounds never matter. You could throw Dirty Larry in front of any environment and you would be just doing the same things over and over again. So the game has to rely purely on its combat to keep you hooked, and as stated, it just isn't gratifying, tactile, or deep enough to hold things together. So the whole experience just falls apart in front of your eyes like a defective game of Jenga. There is, therefore, little reason for you to play it for any extended period of time. The game even makes you restart the Lynx if you want to try again after biting the dust. There are no passwords here, but it's likely you'll just be keeping it switched off. It's ultimately one of those carts you'll fling into the deep recesses of a drawer and won't discover it again for years, where you'll then be reminded of why you put it there in the first place. Not a title that stands up well today then, but considering the non-existent reception Dirty Larry received on its original release, that's not a great surprise. It's still a disappointment, of course, but perhaps it was optimistic to expect much more. It's rumoured that the game was originally going to be a first-person shooter, which I would have personally preferred, if only to see if the Lynx was capable of pulling it off. But I'll leave portable first-person shooters to be discussed another time. Even though the game is a bit of a damp squib, it probably deserves some kind of dramatic send-off, especially considering this is my first retrospective. Let's see what I can do. Hey, thanks for watching. I also make monthly roundups of the latest retro gaming news, and you can find the latest episode by clicking this link. And hey, why not subscribe?
Attack with the swiftness of red hair!